the things we need to do about COVID are not onerous, and perhaps people think it's about lockdown or nothing, and of course that's just not true. It's vaccination, it's clean air, and it's testing and doing something about the result of that test. And of course, it's a mask if you can't breathe clean air. And that's pretty much it. And they're the things that could be promoted. I think there's a range of things feeding into it. Chris's commentary is pretty right, I think, and is driven by, this sort of libertarian world that we live in. It's exacerbated by the trauma that the community feels, and so is willing to buy into the fallacy that it's no longer exceptional, that it's just the flu, that we can treat it like anything else. There is another factor, though, an underlying one, where we have a strategy that some countries adopted in 2020 and failed, and others like ours have adopted post-vaccination, and that's to say infection is our friend. When Omicron came along, it was referred to by the Chief Medical Officer of Australia as our Christmas present. And the notion is that we've gotten ourselves really well vaccinated, a miraculous thing in Australia. So we had virtually no COVID. And of course, most of Australia, if you don't count border controls, which are very big deals, most of Australia didn't have much lockdown so they had no virus and no restrictions on day-to-day movement, and they got vaccinated in that time. And then once Omicron came along, it was, well, maybe this is our natural immunological boost. We've got this highly transmissible, mild in inverted commas virus, and so it can run through the community. Prime Minister Morrison at the time, I think, said we'll push through that 2022 wave, and we'll be really immune. So this was called hybrid immunity. The original version of it was called herd immunity that the UK went for, and other countries ended up, of course, with terrible death tolls and lots of lockdown. Because one of the lockdown fallacies, of course, is lockdown's driven by the virus. You'll have lockdown whether you want it or not. You'll have lockdown whether it's formal policy or not, depending on how much virus is there. That will always be the way. And of course, you can use it strategically, as Australia did, to at least have very little virus in the community. And so, we're in this position where we have a strategy that says, where many of our health officials say, look, it's okay to get infected. While this is happening in young people and so-called healthy people, we'll protect the vulnerable. They want to protect. No one wants people to die or go to hospital. Everyone is trying to stop that. But it's proven to be impossible to protect the vulnerable. We had 20,000 people more than usual die in 2022 in Australia. These are astronomical figures. Prior to the pandemic, if you'd said we'd had 1,000 extra people die on our roads, for example, it'd be horrendous. We had 20,000 die. And that was the tip of the iceberg of the impact, of course, of COVID. And we're going at a similar rate again in 2023. So this hybrid immunity idea is not working because we're all getting infected, but the viral evolution is outpacing us. And our vaccination rates are flat, and vaccines are getting less effective as the viral evolution goes fast as well. So unfortunately, we've locked ourselves in to a strategy, as well as those other reasons, that is behind that was a kind of a pact. When Chris referred earlier to COVID exceptionalism being over, there was a statement made by Prime Minister Albanese based on advice from the Chief Medical Officer in about September 2022. And you could tell from that moment on, all the, even though the federal government, when in opposition, had a very different view, governments and their oppositions in all the states and territories have particular views. All of a sudden, everybody was in alignment, and no one has stepped out of alignment. There was a pact made. I bet it wasn't formal written agreement, and no one is willing to step outside of that pact. And behind that is this strategy, as well as whatever's behind that I think we've already discussed, and there might be other reasons behind it. But the functional reality is they've boxed themselves in now. It is very, very hard for anyone to break that pack amongst gang members as we've got. And so we've got this extraordinary situation where no one talks about deaths, no one talks about long COVID. There's, who knows what the limit is beyond which we would start to talk about it. Testing is largely withdrawn or made much more difficult. To your point about access to public health information, why would you provide public health information when your strategy is to get infected? Your strategy is to promote widespread infection. That is our strategy, as difficult a concept as that is, except, of course, in those who are immunocompromised, if you know who they are, and the aged. And so we're in this very difficult situation nationally, but also globally, and I'm not sure what it's going to take to turn that around.